Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I'm here with a new face that you may not have seen before, but I'm pretty sure you're going to see it again. Mr. James Ward, who is a privacy expert and special counsel with Actuate Law. How you doing today, James?
I'm great. It's good to be with you.
I really appreciate you coming on. For those of you that didn't, you may recognize him from the Leveraging Data book that was given out at the DCS conference in 2023, of which, if you've been in a consulting engagement with me in the past couple of months, you probably heard me quote it, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. But before we jump into it all, James, could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I like to say, a recovering litigator. I was in big law in the courtroom for the better part of a decade and loved the work, really found it interesting. And a lot of the cases that I worked were heavily data intensive cases. So Apple versus Samsung, the mortgage-backed securities cases with the federal government, lots of work with Google and YouTube. And in all of these cases, the data made the difference. That's true in any case, right? It's all about the information. But when you're managing terabytes of data and you're pouring through, mortgages to identify, whether their creditworthiness in 2003, you realize the value of information, both in particular and in bulk. And I got really interested in the interaction between data and privacy and the law, left big law to kind of strike out and do my own thing, moved to the UK where I am now, based out of the University of Oxford, PhD, and then also working on the privacy and AI side here in the UK, and then came onto a call with my old friend Dara, and she said, "Why don't we work together?" And I said, "Yeah, I think we should." And so I've been with Actuate Law for a while now, and it's a great experience working with someone that you've known for years, and so it's been great.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Can you tell everyone a little bit about your role at Actuate Law and what it is that you're doing there?
Yeah, I'm the token ginger on the team. I'm a special counsel, and a lot of what I do is matches what I've been doing for years now, which is a combination of traditional legal advisory work, privacy work, building out privacy compliant systems, dealing with the aftermath of data breaches, and just good old fashioned legal advisory, and then a secondary component, which is very different and kind of exciting, which is data strategy. How do we build data products off of these compliance systems? Once we've figured out how to get our data and clean it and structure it and rigor it, let's make some money off of this. Like, how do we turn this data into an engine for growth, and do it in a way that still respects people's privacy? Because I'm a firm believer that the insights that you can glean from data don't require you, to be big brothering people all the time. And it's proven to be true in the course of the work that I do. And it's a really exciting and dynamic part of the market. So that's a really great part of my practice.
It's a very challenging item that's going to be kind of broken up here, right? Like, we're seeing these new privacy laws coming up at the state level. We're not getting a lot of federal guidance. I'm not even sure if the federal government understands what privacy is or how it functions. But that's another story for another day. And so, the data management piece, I think, is what really attracted to me. So when I started reading your book after DCS, right? Well, like, as soon as I had it in my hands, I was reading it on the plane back, because I'm like, all right, so somebody, one, that I'm going to get a chance to have a chat with, but two, also the focal point on data. And I'm working on some really large projects right now from a development and software standpoint, where I really felt like this was going to be relevant. And I was looking for new ways to look at the data. And if there's one thing, there's a lot that I pulled from this book. So I would highly suggest that anybody in our audience that's sitting in a compliance role, a CEO role, or even a sales role, and wants to better understand how you can leverage the data at hand, I think this is a worthwhile read for you. It's definitely worth a few hours of your time. But I'm going to read one quote that I've been kind of toting as my Bible verse for the day at various consulting engagements, because we're talking about that structured versus the unstructured data. And what I mean by that is like putting something into your system, a record versus I've got 25 spreadsheets that are capable of doing this. And it was something that we witnessed firsthand when we founded ComplyArm and all the compliance management and complaint tracking spreadsheets that existed prior to us building a structured data solution for end users to actually be able to do something with all this information and to understand it. But the quote that I walked away with and literally have in my book and underlined is, by using unstructured tools to manage operational workflows, even if you've modified them superbly, you'll end up with a few employees who own them because they are the quote masters at how to track and use them. And to me, as I've walked around this industry and in all the consulting jobs that I've done, this is a major problem in our space and in all industries. But this structured versus unstructured battle of organizations, if you're going to allow people to run your business on spreadsheets, those people own your business. You don't. I think this is
Yeah.
I've been preaching it for years, and it's the first time I've ever been able to point to it and say, look, I'm not the only one screaming this.
So I think that that passage, the word unstructured is doing double work there, because we could be talking about unstructured data in the sense of it hasn't been put into a format that makes it usable across systems. And you have to have an expert, you need an Oracle to sit there and tell you exactly what it is. I don't mean Oracle itself. I mean like at Delphi, right? You've got someone who is, saging the room and says, okay, I figured out what it means. And that's a problem, right? Because what you've done is you've created a position that's indispensable without necessarily having a person who is themselves indispensable. So whoever occupies that one position, even if they're not great for the company, they have to stay. And that's problematic. But you're also creating a bottleneck because everything needs to go through that one person. On the other side, we're talking about unstructured in the sense of raw text or images or non-OCR PDFs. That's technically unstructured data too. And there is a huge amount of value that exists in those data assets, right? Because most people don't know how to unlock it. But if you do have someone who knows how to unlock it, they're going to be the guardian of that. So once again, now we have the silo and the bottleneck. And when you put them together, you've got a Jenga board, got a Jenga tower sitting on top of a toothpick. It's not sustainable. And that's the thing I think that we're really trying to get at in the book.
I think you did a great job of addressing it because it's something that we're all facing day to day. And it's definitely something I face in my own organizations and even within the past couple of months. So, even having read it and understanding it, being able to avoid it, I think is going to require some specific efforts. How would you normally, direct somebody towards getting away from that? Do you normally try and have them expand on their existing structured systems, or is it more about cross training? Where do you see that immediate kind of first step action?
So in the book, we lay out a 4-step strategy called the Data Smart Method, with a little, trademark on it because we thought it was clever. So identify, value, structure, protect. And in that order, you identify and think through what are the data assets and why. What do we have and why? Then you value them. And that means both. What does this mean to me? And what risk does it pose to me? What does it mean to me as used, and what could it mean to me? Structuring is about not only building the systems that allow you to utilize the data across platforms and across purposes, but also about your relationships with third parties, your contracts, your channel partnerships, your data co-ops. And protect is not only am I thinking about data security, but am I thinking about intellectual property? Am I thinking about building out my moat? And if you follow this strategy, you end up in a place where you start recognizing both the value of the data assets and how to find more. So our goal when we see a situation where data is being siloed or where there's one person who's in control is to take a step back and be like, all right, organically, how did this develop? Because no business necessarily falls into this. It grew out of something that happened. And when we identify what that is, we can say, well, look, you just don't have enough people who understand code, or you don't have enough people who understand the data that you're bringing in. So maybe it's a personnel problem. Maybe you're buying the wrong data. and you're trying to append it to data that simply won't match up. And that's been a huge problem over the years. But when we're talking about identifying the way to solve for why, and what I mean by that is, why are we in this situation? The answer is almost always, we didn't do enough thinking on the front end. We didn't take enough time to think through the strategy or identify, what this data means to us and why. And if you can step back and ask those questions, the solutions start to present themselves.
I feel like companies weren't looking at data the same way in the 1990s as we are now. Our ability to manage information, right? I forget the statistic, but it's like 50% of the world's data was created in the last 12 months. It's somewhere in that range. I'll have to go pull the statistic, but I just being able to manage that much information. And it's funny when you were talking about the PDFs and the kind of that being an unstructured data, because that has been the bane of this industry's existence for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, look, we were very blessed when we started receiving media documentation on accounts in a PDF format. Like, that was a big step. But early on, those PDFs were just scanned JPEGs, right? So there was no manipulatable data within that PDF file itself. It was just a picture presented in a portable digital file from Adobe, right? So it was somewhat limited, and obviously it's expanded from there, but we had to go from optical character recognition and going in there and trying to read it to now being able to actually manipulate those things maybe without OCR and actually being able to read the text within them, depending on the bank, the format, etc. But it's been interesting to see that evolution of how we've always kind of been an industry that had to take this mountain of information and find the value in it. And it sounds like that's a lot of what you've built your career around, which leads me kind of my next question, which is you're now in this position where you're living in the UK, you're doing some work in the United States, which seems like you are like right in the epicenter of everything privacy related. And so GDPR on the UK side, obviously you're watching everything that's happening on the US side and the patchwork of state items that are starting to pop up. But I guess my question for you is, with the visibility that you have today and the knowledge of data management, how do you see the data privacy situation evolving over the next couple of years?
That's a great question. And I think it gets answered by pointing to another phenomenon, which is the development of widely commercially available AI-driven tools. And by AI, what I'm really talking about are faster ML scripts, right? And what do they require? Absolutely massive amounts of data on which to process and run their scripts, right? That's the whole game in whether it's large language models or simple recommender systems, is pulling in as much information as you can, running a couple of K-closeness tests and saying, I've got it solved. And the privacy piece over the last 5 years, I was talking about this with my brother, who was the co-author with me in the book. The last 5 years, we were waiting for the proverbial shoe to drop on privacy. Like, oh, Google's going to get it. Apple's going to maybe swoop in and do something with privacy. But it's been crickets. Why is Amazon being sued by the federal government? Antitrust. Why is Facebook being sued? Not protecting kids. These are things that have been around for 100 years. Privacy requires you to understand the relationship between data, the systems that operate in tech-enabled companies, the outputs, and how that affects an individual person. Academics can't even agree on what those things are, let alone state legislatures, right? So there's a lot of confusion, right? But AI systems, which require this massive amount of data, are going to make the same kinds of mistakes and same kind of stupid decisions that humans make because we program them, right? They're going to look just like us. But when they make a mistake, when they say something that's wrong in a chatbot, or when they make a decision about you that turns out that it was based on a protected characteristic, when that gets to a judge is going to be like, I know what that is. I know what an unfair deceptive trade practice is. I know how to punish you for that. And so the outcomes on the AI side are going to educate judges and legislatures about the role that data plays in fueling the decisions that people don't like. And when they figure that out on the AI side, the privacy side's going to follow. So it's a bit of a tail wagging the dog situation, but the privacy side, I think, is going to get massively caught up in the next few years because the AI stuff is going to educate the market about the effects of widespread data usage, and it's interesting. People care about these AI systems. They're interested in them. If you say, well, the general data protection regulation, their eyes glaze over. It's like, come to a dinner party with me. I'll show you. But you talk about AI and people are all of a sudden, they're keyed up, right? So that's, I think, going to be the big development, I think.
Well, that's interesting to kind of see that evolution over time and kind of how we're moving into it. I was recently reading the TransUnion released a Datos survey where they were talking about artificial intelligence use within the receivables management space. And if I remember the stat correctly, it was like 11% of companies are actually using it today. 40% of companies are quote unquote investigating it, and the rest just don't even know where to start. Which I find to be interesting, and I find myself very early in the AI journey myself, as well as I look at Branding Arc, specifically my marketing firm that represents the receivables management space, and how can we start to leverage some of this and leverage that data in the mountains of search engine optimization data that we have to start to understand, dissect those things, and turn them into actionable items. But turning these insights into action, so to speak, feels like that's the catalyst for this industry to start moving some of this stuff forward. There's going to have to be something that prompts these groups to make that decision that brings it up from 11%. That seems really low.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the answer is going to be missed opportunities. I think people will realize when market share starts to be gobbled up what they should have been doing and weren't doing. I'll give you an example of the sort of the too late situation. When when Jameson's in the 80s and 90s decided that they wanted to be the number one Irish whiskey brand, Diageo made a decision that they were going to go out and they were going to buy bartenders all over the world all the Jamesons they wanted. Have as much as you like. Here's a promotion. Here's a trip to Dublin. Here's all the things that you want to do, because they recognized that that was a channel partnership. And no one was thinking about how to grow brands, especially consumer brands, in that way with channel partnerships. And 15 years later, there was not a state in the United States where Jameson didn't have a 90 share, at least, in the Irish whiskey market, and at least a 75 share in brown liquor overall. Okay. The recognition of where the channel partnership existed and how to exploit it is what drives growth in every industry. I use Irish whiskey, because, obviously, but the lesson holds true for everybody. And I think when you start to recognize how using an AI tool as a partner as opposed to a tool, when you think about this as a channel partnership to unlock relationships with customers to deliver more than what they thought they could have, or to identify ways to expand what your options are, then you'll start to see that this is an enablement device as opposed to just a new intake mechanism. And I think the 11% who are using it probably already see that. The 40% who are investigating it are trying to figure that out. And the rest, I think, honestly, maybe just saying, let's see where this goes. Because the last thing you want to do is throw all of your weight behind the machine learning equivalent of Blu-ray, right? What if in a year, right, all of a sudden, Christopher Nolan aside, right? Christopher Nolan aside, Blu-ray nobody's using them anymore. So you don't want to be in that position. And I think that's where learning what's valuable, regardless of the product, regardless of the tool that you're using, like learning how to have human in the loop, learning how to have structured and rigorous data, learning how to have the people who can utilize tools and use it to augment their abilities. Those are the lessons to draw now, not necessarily any individual product.
That is incredibly insightful. I mean, that is the best advice I've heard for this industry in their application of artificial intelligence or starting their artificial intelligence journey. That's really just a great approach to it, right? Start with those baby steps, start with that understanding, and then see what you can actually roll out and deploy in small test bites. I'm going to take that to heart as I go down my path and journey here, kind of deploying and trying to leverage some new technology to do exactly what you were talking about, which is provide a better service to my end user customers without having to increase my price point.
Yeah. This is a situation where baby steps are still progress. And everybody assumes that what we need to do is have massive leapfrogging ahead. But really, the ability to identify savings and efficiencies to deliver value back to customers, and then to figure out how the data that you've gleaned from that interaction can power additional, it's a flywheel effect. And as long as the goal is always to improve the experience, to create more opportunities for growth, you have the right mindset, as opposed to, oh, I'm just going to deploy this. This is the future and I want to be a part of the future. And if you can separate yourself from that, that's the way that, thoughtful and careful integrations become engines for growth.
Wow. All right. You've provided a lot of information for us to unpack, and I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to chat with me today. This insight is just absolutely incredible.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad to chat with you.
Absolutely. For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions you'd like to ask James or myself, you can leave those in the comments on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we'll be responding to those. If you have additional topics that you'd like to see us cover, you can leave those in the comments below as well. And hopefully I can get James to come back at least one more time to help me continue to create great content for a great industry. But until next time, James, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on today. Your insights are invaluable. Absolutely. And for those of you watching from home, thank you so much. We'll see you again soon. Thanks, everybody.